Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webcast on parenting in long-term recovery. My name is Katie Volk, and I'm with the Opioid Response Network, ORN, a network run by SAMHSA, and I am delighted to be here with you all today and this brilliant group of panelists that we've been able to assemble. We are going to format this like a panel conversation as insofar as we are able through Zoom. And so my colleagues, Meghann Perry, Tiffany Clark, and Alex Fidalgo will introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their background, and then we'll just have a facilitated conversation. You are welcome to put questions in the chat box. We have a few that we've prepared as well, but we really hope for this to be able to be a discussion among friends and colleagues. And so what I will do now is toss it to Meghann Perry to introduce herself, then Alex, then Tiffany. They'll tell you a little bit about their background, and then we'll dive into a deeper conversation on what the experience is like to parent over the long term while we're in recovery. And so Meghann, I'm going to toss it to you.
All right, thank you, Katie. So my name's Meghann, and I am a recovery coach and recovery coach trainer, and I work in recovery theater and prevention and storytelling. And, I came here by way of my own journey with substance use disorder and recovery. So I've been in recovery since December 28th, 2011. So much has happened in that time, but I have been parenting a child alone for most of that time. So, when I became pregnant with my daughter, I was on methadone and I was married, but both of us were sort of just in the starting stages of trying to get to stop using heroin, and I got pregnant, not planned. And we decided, we were going to make a go of it, and kind of thinking maybe that she would, help us get clean and, whatever. I honestly can't even explain the thought processes for me at that point in my life. I'm so far removed from who that person was, but I know I was scared and confused and just sort of moving from crisis to crisis. And so that pregnancy was really scary. I spent some of my pregnancy in jail. I was facing a felony and some prison time. And so, being in jail pregnant on methadone was, it's a tough way to start my parenting. I spent my first 2 Mother's Day days in jail. My daughter spent 2 months in the hospital to being weaned off of methadone. I was lucky enough to get out and into a drug court program, but it was a really long, hard road. And I lost custody of her when she was 4 because I had resumed use and was totally incapable of taking care of her. And 6 years went by. And I got her back when she was 10. And I was just starting my recovery, and we kind of grew up together in recovery. I mean, I really didn't have a lot of adult skills. I was really a kid myself when I got into recovery. And so I had a partner that was there for a little while, but it really was just me and her. Her name is Sophie. And I didn't know anything about parenting, and we didn't really know each other. And we had to get to know each other, and I had to suddenly take care of her. And, I didn't even know how to talk to the teachers at school, or when I should talk to the teachers at school, or, and I wasn't allowed to volunteer or do anything at school because of my record. And it was just a long journey. My daughter has a chronic illness, a genetic disorder that's been really just turned our lives upside down. And it's been a lot, we've gone through a lot together in recovery. And she's now almost 20. She just moved out, has a job, is living with a partner and doing amazing. And I am suddenly free. It's really been interesting for me to be on a journey with kind of having a life to myself where I'm healthy and I can do the things that I want to do, and my parenting has shifted into, you know, parenting an adult rather than parenting a child or a teenager. So we've learned a lot together, but recovery has been a big part of how I've parented, um, and what that, you know, what that looks like, and how we're in recovery together as a family. So I'm excited to be here. Yeah, and I love this topic. We do not talk about this enough. So thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Alex, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Pull my clock real quick. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alex Fidalgo. How do I got here? Well, I was born in New York, raised in Puerto Rico, and then most of my life in Florida, about 30 years. Uh, my addiction took over after when I turned 15. I was a little rebellious. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And basically it wasn't about drugs, you know, it was more about partying and having fun and being at the beach and things like that. And eventually, you know, hanging out with some crowd that drugs was involved, that kind of took a shift in my life, and that became part of my life. So you know, I've done it all. The jail, been in treatment, you know it. My last bit was June 2006, and that was the last time I ever used drugs again, and I ever looked back. You know, I was tired. I told the judge this is what I wanted to do, that I wanted a treatment and I wanted to get better, and you know, that's exactly what I did, and I never looked back. So I've been in recovery 15 years. Um, so how do I become a parent? Wow. So I started dating this woman. You know, I met her dancing because that was my thing. I love to dance, uh, salsa and all that kind of stuff. So I was still going to clubs and things like that, even in my recovery, because I love music and I love dancing. So I met her, and she had 5 kids, and you know, I fell in love with the kids. You know what I mean? I don't know. It was just a good connection between me and the kids, and obviously I didn't know what I was gonna go into when we finally decided, okay, this is serious, let's do something about it. And we got married. And, you know, the only parenting skill I had is the parenting skill that they gave me as a son, right? Because it kind of like, I look at my son, I felt like I became my dad and my mother. Uh, but I had to rely on my wife because she'd been parenting those kids for 15 years. So that was the kind of thing, you know. And when I met her, I was already like a year and a half in recovery, and I was under probation. So there was a lot of things going on with me as well, that they grew up with me in recovery. You know, they never saw me in my addiction, which is a good thing. Um, Going fast forward, you know, go figure, we had a daughter. So she's 12 now. We were not planning for it, but it happened. And I guess my God wanted me to be a really serious dad. And so everything shift, right? Because now I say they're my kids. So, you know, I don't look at them as my step kids. So when I say it to tell the story, but you know, when I talk to other people out there, they're mine. You know, I look at them exactly the same way I look at my daughter, because I feel that way. I look at them and I feel like a father for real. And I learned through the process, and recovery plays a big part because it was about, I realized that I needed to make some more changes, right? As I became a parent. And now, maybe at the beginning, not that I wasn't serious about recovery, but it was about changing some things about me personally, right? How do I become a better parent? How do I become a better father? How do I understand and listen to people? And you know, and that was a big part, because when you have kids, you gotta listen. You gotta understand that piece. So it was working with me, right? Working with the things that I needed to work myself, so like that I could be a better person to them. Um, and we still do, right? By all means, I haven't graduated. You know, I continue to work on these things, and you know, and yesterday I was talking to my colleagues that I learned to listen to my wife, right? Because as a man, my job is always, I wanted to fix things, and sometimes they don't need fixing. Sometimes they just need that ear, and they just need that person to be there, and that's what I worked on. You know, listen. So then later on, they'll tell me what they need, and then I work towards that. And that's basically, I'm excited to be here. I'm glad that you invited me. And, like Megan says, we don't have a book. We going along. We're writing that book as we go along. And hopefully we can give you some of the stuff that we've been doing in recovery. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. And Tiffany Clark is here with us as well, and I'm going to have her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Clark. I am a bilingual, bicultural licensed clinical social worker. I'm based out of Massachusetts. I currently work as a clinician and a supervisor for a program that works with pregnant and postpartum women and their children impacted by substance use disorders. In addition to my clinical work with families, I supervise peer recovery coaches who have lived experiences themselves. I am personally a person that abstains from drugs and alcohol, but substances came into my life at an early age by family members who were in active phases of their addiction. My mother became a foster mother to my younger cousins who were involved with child welfare at the time. And that was one of the many ways our family really came to understand substance use disorders. Given that experience, I didn't think I would ever be ready to work in this field. So I started my career actually working in a domestic violence program. So I worked at a domestic violence shelter, serving children who were exposed to intimate partner violence and were fleeing dangerous situations. And that experience really allowed me to understand the complexities of intimate partner violence and the various compounding vulnerabilities, right, that come with those experiences. So I realized also that the work of supporting children survivors was incredibly fulfilling, but it felt incomplete without this parenting piece, right? So I was seeing children sort of in this different context, right, about their experience, but didn't have the parent there in the room. So I became more interested in working with parent-child relationships and continued my career focusing on the importance of nurturing that attachment relationship because it's so healing, right? And while I'm not exactly sure like what series of events led me to the field of substance use disorders after saying that I wasn't going to do it and it was too close to home, it was clear to me that this is where I was always meant to end up. And in particularly, again, this context of supporting those early relationships between parents and caregivers and children in the context of recovery. So that's a little bit about me. I'm super happy to be here and really honored to be here, especially with Alex and Meghann, and really excited to hear how everything goes today.
Well, thank you so much. So participants, these are your panelists here. We have a couple of questions that I'm gonna use to get the discussion going, but feel free as I've seen people commenting in the chat, and if you've got questions or comments, certainly keep them coming. I should also mention that if you scroll down and you want a live transcript of the event, you're certainly able to do that. You can do subtitles or things like that. And I'm gonna shut my technology off there. I apologize for that little interruption. So, one of the things that I know that we've talked about in preparing for today, and that I've talked with all of you about individually, is about how the principles of recovery and the things that help you in recovery and maintain your recovery are also the principles that help you become a good parent. And that there's a lot of crossover there. And I wonder if maybe Meghann, I'll toss it to you first and then to Alex to just comment on how being in recovery has helped you in parenting.
Yeah, I get really excited about this. I love talking about this. I feel like I grew up in these last 10 years of recovery. And having Sophie with me at age 10 to grow up together has been really amazing. And so, our tribe has been like all the aunties, women in recovery and their kids, and just having that gift of that chosen family to influence her as well as me has been a huge gift. I never intentionally sort of put on her recovery teachings or whatever, but you can't help but like infuse the people around you with them. So, you know, as I was learning things like how to let go, and not try to control everything, or how to trust that I'm going to be okay no matter what, you know, how to be kind and loving, but also tell the truth. Like, these are all things I learned in my recovery journey, and miraculously, it feels like to me, she has learned. And so she reflects back sometimes stronger recovery than I do. You know, she can like sort of not call me out in a bad way, but acknowledge or recognize something that's not very spiritual or not very, you know, recovery minded. You know, the first time she said to me, just take it one day at a time, Mom. You know, I was like, oh, I love you, 13-year-old, you know. But I really think, you know, an authentic, oh my gosh, being authentic, me learning to be authentic and then being authentic with her and her being authentic to me. Like, so many people have, oh, teenagers, and, you know, it can be rough parenting a teenager, and you know, they get distant from you, and you don't know what's going on with them. I didn't have that. You know, Sophie and I have been really, really close. And part of that comes from adversity, right? So I had her 0 to 4. And then, and like what Tiffany was talking about, that lack of attachment, man, I struggled so hard with coming to feel like a mother who loves her daughter. I really had a hard time identifying with that. And I parented out of obligation rather than out of this, like, you know, glorified image of maternal love that the media loves to put on us and everything. I was just like, I just need to survive this day and keep this kid alive, because that's what I'm supposed to do. So it wasn't until she came to live with me at 10 years old that I was like, oh, I gotta like deal with this. I've got to feel like her mother. And I could not have felt less like her mother. You know, it was like somebody put, I don't know, like a car in parts in the living room, and I'm supposed to like put it together somehow, you know. I didn't know how to do that. But in recovery, learning how to be authentic allowed us to be okay with all of the things that kind of weren't okay. You know, it allowed us just to always have that connection. And so that bond is so strong. And like, she appreciates me in a way that I think some kids who have not been separated from their parents don't, you know. So the gratitude we have to be in being with each other, I'm so grateful to have her, and she's so grateful to have finally been able to grow up with her mom. And she'll tell you, like, I don't even remember not being with you. Like, to her, it's her lifetime, you know. In 20 years of life, 10 of them have been me and her, and that's how she thinks of it. She doesn't think about the rest of it, you know. And I keep waiting for her to be mad at me, to go through that process, right, of like the grievances and the losses and stuff that were a result of my substance use disorder. And I check in with her like every other, you know, year or so, like, and she's like, we're fine. I'm fine. I'm not mad, you know. And I'm just like, okay. And the other thing I would say, me having faith allowed me to parent her in a more hands-off way that allowed her to make a lot of mistakes and figure things out and fall down. And I would be there to like give her a hand to stand back up and say, hey, what went on? What was that like? You know, are you okay? What do you think you want to do next? Like, radically changed the way that we communicate and the ability to stay close during the teenage years. No helicopter parenting, you know, it was really not like that at all. And of course my mom was like freaking out. But I gave her a lot of space because I trusted that if she's meant to be okay, she's going to be okay. And if she's meant to have, you know, if, you know, I believe in God, if God's got a different plan for her, I got to be okay too. So I'm not going to try to control all the situations and control her movements and what she does and all of that. Yeah, it's been huge. And I'll just say this too. She started smoking pot at 14. And I freaked out, but then I kind of came to my senses, and we've been on a journey with that. And recovery has given me all the tools to navigate that without completely being like, oh my God, she's gonna have a needle in her arm and overdose, and just handle that, day to day and with some grace and some faith and trust. So, and I can't say enough about motivational interviewing with teenagers. Try it. Yeah.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. And that trust and authenticity, I think, is so key, right? Kids can smell fake from a mile away in the fog, for sure. And one of the things that's striking to me is you always talk, Meghann, about chosen family. And Alex, I hear that in your story too, that you chose, right, to go on this journey. And so I wonder if you want to speak a little bit about what that was like for you, both being a step parent and being in recovery and having a child of your own.
It was unique. But the recovery principles is there, right? Again, I think the key point is communication. I was very honest from the get-go with my wife, right? Before we started dating, I let her know who I was, where I came from, all the things that I went through. Because if I didn't do it, my mother was going to do it anyway. So I made sure I did that, so she knew who I was as a person, because I needed to give her that opportunity, whether she wanted to be with me or not, right? And vice versa, right? She let me know who she was as a person and the kids and everything that went on in her life. So that started good, because communication is so important, right? With the kids, I don't think it was so much about the kids. I think it was much more about me. How do I keep working with me, right? Implementing more spiritual principles in my life. And I think that's what it started shifting when I started working with my kids, right? Like I share a little bit, some of them had little difficulty in learning and things like that as they were growing up. So I had to learn to read and look for information, how process things, right? Because I'm a person that captures things real quick and I can go ahead and react, but not everybody thinks that way, right? And definitely my kids didn't think that way. And that was some of the like bumps that we used to have in between marriage, that sometimes I won't see. Because again, I brought the parenting skills that I brought, it was what I was being taught as a kid, right? So those things stay with me. My parents were firm when they gave me discipline. Like, hey, if I was punished, I was punished. It wasn't like, hey, you punish today and tomorrow you're not. I saw consistency. They've been married 52 years. So having my parents, having some friends that having long-term marriages, like Meghann said, having those people in my life, and also, I go to a church that also have friends that also influence it, that in my life, but it was more about me knowing that I was in early recovery and I needed to work on those things, right? There was still certain behaviors and characters that I needed to change. Like maybe when I raised my boys, yelling and things like that, because I will get a little, fidgety, and I'm going to give it raw, because I'm not going to hide here, right? I was inexperienced. I was still learning. There was things that bothered me that they were doing, but I needed to understand those things, right? But it was about, until I earned their trust, that they knew that I was going to be there, that I wasn't going to leave, that I was going to be backing them up in whatever it was. And having those conversations and being transparent and show integrity, right? Because I needed to be integrity to say that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it and not do those things. So that took some time, right? And knowing that they knew no matter what, I was going to stay. And eventually that happened, right? Did we had our ups and downs as they got older? Because the youngest was like 12, right? Or 11. And then the twin daughters were at 12. The other one was 13. And the other one was 17. So we had our ups and downs, because their personality starts to shift and change. So now parenting skills changes completely again, because it's a new stage, and then, we had our daughter. So they all wanted to tend to my daughter. That was like the queen of the house. They all wanted to take care of her. So we had our issues with that because they all want to baby her. They all wanted to, it was, so I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. But it was funny because my wife said to me, listen, I'm going to baby this one because I already took care of 5. So it's your job for discipline on that one. So I was like, oh my God, I'm on my own on this. So I'm like the bad guy in the picture and the thing when I had to get discipline to my daughter and things. But one of the things that we did, we came to an agreement. When it had to do with her kids, which they're mine, uh, I will have that conversation with her, and she will take care of the discipline, right, with her kids. That was the conversation we had. We say, okay, if there's something that we don't agree, in closed doors, we'll talk about it. And I said, listen, I think maybe you need to address these things. And I will give her my point of view. And then, she will go and address and sit down with the kids and talk about it and have that conversation. And she will never take she will never take my power away in front of them. And I will never take her power away from in front of her. If we had a disagreement, closed doors, we'll talk about it. If she felt that I was a little too harsh, she will say, hey, listen, I think you were a little too harsh on that. I think you maybe need to calm down, right? And sometimes, yeah, I will put a little, but then I needed to also listen that she's been parenting for a lot longer than me, and those things. And then when I didn't have no clue, I will call my dad and like, hey, what about this, and ask for because I didn't have the solution. I didn't understand this. It was brand new. And then I'm also working on my recovery, right? And I'm changing attitudes and personalities and behavior. And I think now the last 3 years we've been living the best life of our life, right? Because everything kind of settled in. I have the greatest. My son works in the field too. He's a recovery coach. He works in the jail. He even trains. So that's been a blessing for me. All my other kids are married, except for one that lives in New York, and I have a good relationship with him. There was the piece about, because I know we're going to talk about it, when he wanted to smoke marijuana, right? So that was like, obviously I'm a person in recovery, and I'm like, so we had those issues. So the mother had to explain to him, like, listen, this can't be happening here. You can do whatever you want outside these doors, but obviously there's other kids here too. So we cannot allow you to do what you want, because then we have to let everybody else do what they want. So he decided to move on and do these things. And now we have a better relationship, right? Because I understand his point of view. I got to let him be. He's a man, right? And he has to decide for his own what's right for him, what's not. We just give him information. And that's what we do.
Thank you so much. We have a whole bunch of questions coming in here. I'm going to synthesize a few of them, toss it to Tiffany, and then we've got a whole bunch more, which is just wonderful. Tiffany, I'm wondering, as you're listening to all of this, like I hear so much coming out, and I'm wondering, as you're listening to this, how you and your team think about working with parents, because you're working with parents whose kids are younger and sort of starting their recovery and then getting into kind of launching into longer term recovery. What are you hearing? Where are your thoughts? I'll leave it broad for now.
Yeah, no, I just appreciate Alex and Meghann sharing so honestly. And, I think it's definitely a piece of work that we're always thinking about, right? Because how do you balance the needs of a parent and a child, right? We're talking about the relationship. So a lot of times these systems are geared to sort of attend to one or the other. And there are very few spaces where people are really paying attention to the relationship. So for us, it's really important. Like, it's almost like a triad, right? Like it's the provider, it's the parent, and the child, right? So we always want to keep those needs in focus. And we're always thinking about, what are the developmental needs of the child? Like, where are they at, right? And how can we talk with them in a way that makes sense to them? And at the same time, the developmental stage of the parent, right? Like, you're going through this phase of recovery. And yeah, sometimes we see folks who are in early recovery, sometimes people in longer term recovery, but with that comes different seasons. So we're always attending to sort of those developmental needs. And, as we talked about, I shared with Meghann and Alex yesterday, the power of storytelling, and that, like, sometimes I think we go through these experiences and we're not considering or maybe taking into account that someone else is having an experience of our experience, right? And so how do we bring more capacity for reflection? And that's really, I think, where we serve such a pivotal role, because it's really making space for both the parent and the child to talk about what it's been like for them to be in this relationship. And like Alex said, like the communication, right? Or when Meghann said, my daughter says, like, I don't remember that time, or like, this is what's important to me now. Like, those stories need to be heard, and they need to be shared in a safe way. So I really see the work that we do like is like an entree for that. And it's like setting the stage for like, how do we build these narratives that take into account multiple perspectives. And sometimes kids have questions. Sometimes kids have questions about what happened, or why did it happen that way? Or, it's interesting. Kids just absorb so many different things. And so I think having a space where parents feel empowered and supported to share what they feel comfortable sharing in a way that makes sense to their kids, but that their kids also get an explanation from the person that means the most to them, right? Like, I want to know about where you were those 3 months when I didn't see you. Or, I was with grandma and she told me that you were sick. Are you okay? Are you okay now? And so how do we answer to those questions? And so I think there are things that we're always keeping in mind. And as much as we want to sort of like, especially in longer term recovery, and especially when kids get older, to sort of like maybe brush through those like hard conversations or hard moments. We also want to make space for being able to like speak the unspeakable and talk about the things that are really difficult. And I think that's the role that we play in, or try to play, right, in these relationships.
And I so appreciate that. I mean, one of the questions, or a few of the questions we've gotten in, have to do with how do you talk to your children about your recovery and about some of the things, Tiffany, you were alluding to, and how have you handled it as they've gotten older? How do you handle those things? And why don't I toss it to Meghann, then we'll go over to Alex.
Yeah, similar to what Tiffany was saying, it was always, my mother always told my daughter I was sick. And when I was in jail, I was in the hospital. When I was in rehab, I was in the hospital. It was always like, let's go visit mom at the hospital. So, I mean, my daughter has visited me, never in jail, but at many programs. And when it was great. I had a year-long residential program. That was the last program I went through. And she was allowed to come on the weekends and holidays and stuff. And I just remember driving her there, like I'd met my mom or something, and I was driving back to the program, and she was asking questions about it, and I just said to her, when the doctor, she was 9, I think 8 or 9 at that time, when the doctor gives you medicine and you're supposed to take it the way the label says, well, I don't follow the label. I take too much and I can't take it the way it's supposed to be. So that's what, like, sort of the starting point of it. And then, I have to say, I'm so grateful she spent that time with me at the program, because she was just another person in a mix of all walks of life, who all stages of dealing with their substance use issues. And so it was just like a normal thing. It became normalized that we talk about like weird stuff and hard stuff, and everyone's really weird and different. And like that we're all connected anyways. And so, I think that was a really great place to kind of spring from. It's about the people, not about like every bad thing I did or something like that. And just over the years, I shared more with her. I told her I had to start going to meetings to support my recovery. And so I'm going to tell her where I'm going, she's like, why do I have to go to Danielle's house every Tuesday night from 7 to 8, because mom needs some help to get help, So it just developed over time. And really by the time she was about 16, she knew just about everything. I held back a little bit on the, like how she came to be. She knew that I was pregnant with her in jail and on methadone, but she didn't know that she wasn't planned, that it was terrifying, and it might not have been a good thing, So I sort of, one of the last pieces I shared was kind of what it was like because she was asking, what it was like when I got pregnant and found out I was pregnant. And because she had all that context, she understood. And she was of an age where she was, sexually active and childbearing age and that. And so she was curious. And so, hey, let me share the truth with you. Because I think, again, that authenticity and the truth is so much more instructive and useful to kids and especially adolescents and young adults than if we're like, oh, no, I never smoked pot. Like, then they're just going to be like, oh, you're just another just say no. You're not real. Like, she came home one day and she's like, what made you want to do more drugs than pot? And I was like, oh, I see you, girlfriend. Let me talk about how I was trying to chase something that didn't exist and I never found it, so that I think is so important. And so we've had open conversation. She knows pretty much all of it. She knows I brought her to a what is this, essentially a crack house when she was 4. She knows that I did that and she understands why I did that. And no shame. I don't tell it to her with shame, and she's not ashamed of me at all. She tells everyone, oh, what does your mom do? Oh, she teaches recovery storytelling and she's in recovery, she's proud to be the child of a parent in recovery. And I think that's really amazing.
That's thank you for sharing that. I think it's part of how we break down some of the stigma around here, which is a few of the questions have had to do with that. And I'm wondering, Alex, both what your thoughts are, and if I can add to that for you to comment on, is how you balance, both talking with your kids and how that's come to be, because your kids were older at this point, and also how you balance taking care of your own recovery in that space with the parenting responsibilities.
Well, being honest, I just, I didn't hide anything from them. It's hard for them, even my wife, to see me when I tell them some of the stories because they never seen me in my addiction. So it's kind of hard, but I was open with them, right? I just like I was open with my wife, I was open with them. Some of the things that I went through, my struggles, and by any chance, they're very honest with me about things. Except for the oldest one, I don't have issues with them want to do drugs or smoke marijuana or anything. They drink, but they're very responsible, a responsible age. In my recovery, I'm always aware. Like, I wake up sometimes because I don't take medication or nothing, but obviously I did a lot of drugs. So my brain, once in a blue moon, is not gonna wake up how it needs to. But I'm very responsible and let my wife know that day. Like, hey, listen, today's not a good day, right? I might be down or whatever is going on with me, and I have to take care of me, right? Go to a meeting, or sometimes I got a DJ equipment. I'll go and play with my music and things like that. But I'm very responsible, and I try, because it's not their fault that some days I'm not on my best, right? Even with work, right? That's part of self-care. Like, sometimes as a coach, there are times I need to step away from work because I'm not on my best. I need to realize that I did some damage at a younger age. And whether I'm not taking medication today, once in a blue moon, my brain is not where it needs to be. And I need to go get what I need to. And that's the part of being responsible, right? Understanding my anxieties, understanding how I feel on a daily basis, and letting them know, right? Like, hey, if I'm not feeling well, because I might say a smart answer or something like that, right? But it is because maybe I'm irritated. So I try to, like, protect them from that and protect my wife from that. And my wife already knows me. Like, yeah, okay, what you need, go ahead and take your time, go ahead and do what you need to do. And I do that. So I think it's more about, hey, don't hide anything. And about the birds and the bees, we have that conversation with them. Who better than the parents to have that conversation than anybody else? I don't want them to find out from somebody else. So my wife takes care of that. When it talks with my girls, she's very honest and brutal about these things. And my guys too. So it's having those conversations, not be scared, and kind of listen to them, and okay. And you'd be surprised a lot of the stuff that they already know. But it's better to have those conversations openly, and so they can see who you are. And the last thing I'm gonna say is, When you make a mistake, own it. I'm not perfect. You know, it was hard for me to say I'm sorry. I'm being honest. It was hard for me to say I'm sorry. So I had to learn to do that. So sometimes I gotta go in the room with my daughter and say, hey, listen, you know, I know sometimes I might be a little too strict or something like that. It ain't got nothing to do with that. And I have those conversations with her to let her know that I love her and that I love my kids. You know, that, you know, I'm not gonna do this perfect, but it's okay that I make that mistake and have that conversation with them.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing to be able to figure out how to admit fault and ask for forgiveness and then be forgiven, right? That's such a fundamentally human and humanizing experience. You know, one of the questions that we've got here has to do with the court system, and I'm actually going to broaden it a little bit. Is how can, the courts usually give parents a year or two, or varies place to place, to get into recovery and before making a permanent custody decision. And the question is around how the courts might be more patient or work better with parents who are in recovery before the state takes permanent custody. And so that's the question on the table. And I actually wonder, like, even more broadly, as service systems, whether it's courts or mental health or whatever, how we can work better with parents who are in recovery, and trying to parent and also make sure the kids are safe and well cared for and all of those things. Who would like to tackle that question first?
Well, I mean, I mean, certainly I have a lot of lived experience in that arena. Oh, wow. The systems do not currently reflect the reality of what substance use disorder and recovery in action looks like and acts like and walks like and talks like. This idea that someone's going to tell you you have to be in recovery in this way on this date and for this length of time is not what it actually looks like in the real world. I was in one of the first drug courts. It's over 20 years ago now. And it was so rigid. And I went to jail 6 times in my first 4 weeks. Because I was very naughty. I could not, it doesn't even matter, but it wasn't helpful. It wasn't helpful. It's better than prison. But I think, continuing to put real stories out there, I teach the art form of storytelling to people impacted so we can better communicate how human we are and how we don't fit in a mold. Just because we have substance use disorder doesn't mean this is what our journey looks like. So I think that that's really powerful. And I think there are a lot more people in the criminal justice system who understand that, but not nearly enough. We really have to let go of the war on drugs narrative. We really have to let go of the moral, like, I should be able to tell you no and you should stop because it's naughty. It's let's move it into the public health arena, even more so. And but as for I talk about it as for the criminal justice, I've done a lot of work around reform for criminal justice, and it's like turning the like a cruise ship around, like, and we're just little tugboats, like, come on, like, try to get this huge ship to turn around and head in a different direction. But I think it's passionate people on all sides, talking, storytelling, communicating, and just keep staying in, be the tugboat and just push in your arena. So.
Can I say?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm like Meghann. I think they're shifting a little bit. They've gotten a little bit better. But there's so many pieces to it, right? I think that's the hardest job they have. because they don't know us personally as a person, right? When they have to make a decision, they're trying to make the best decision for the kid and for the parent, right? And sometimes it's very difficult. So I won't even want their job, even people with DCF and things like that. That's like a hard job because sometimes they try to make the best call and it's not. And then things happen in the house because you assuming that the parent's gonna do good and then it doesn't happen. So it's very difficult, I think they're trying to come along in that setting. And then there's the other piece about culture. Every culture is different as well. So that's something that is very hard for the court to pinpoint because culturally, some things, the way parents discipline and do things is totally different. So it's very hard for them to really sit down and say, hey, yeah, this is the way it's gonna be. Again, I think it's about being honest. I think it's about having these communication kind of shifting. I do also a lot of reform with Health Resources in Action. We talk about how do we make these changes? How do we have more communication with the judges and the courts? So like that, they see that I think recovery coaching has become a big piece of that because we in the courts, right? We advocating for the people that we work with. And I think that's shifting a little bit, but it's very hard because you don't know when you make the right call, when you do the wrong call. It all depends on the person that's really doing the work, right? So if probably they do a call for me and I'm serious about my recovery and doing the right thing, then you know what? I go along with what the court says, right? And show up and manage my probation, make sure I take care of the kid, make sure I do all these things. So I'm responsible for that, but sometimes you don't know that. And I can, one of the things that Meghann says, like when I'm working with somebody that is going through court, I cannot get attached to the outcome. I'll do my best to provide them with resources and making sure that they be successful, what they need to do so they can get their kid back. But I can't get tied to the outcome because ultimate is up to that person.
Yeah, and I just want to add real quick because I kind of got myself on the criminal justice train because I speak about that so much, but just in terms of sort of custody of my daughter and that, I was given, the daycare reported me, and I was given 6 weeks to get better and take her back. And the daycare provider, who is a wonderful woman who's still in my life, took her and said, I'll hold her until you get through rehab and come back and get her. And I could not get my butt into rehab. And then they gave me 6 months, I just couldn't stop using. I'm so devastated by the loss of everything that mattered to me. And so at the end of a year, that family said, you either have to have her adopted. We either have to adopt her or she's got to go because we can't do this. We love her so much, And I am incredibly fortunate that my parents were able to take custody of her for the remaining 5 years that it took for me to actually get better. And that's really not the norm. That's incredibly unusual for, I'm sure some of the people caught it like, wow, you didn't have custody for 6 years and then you got her back. And that was because I had family. That's a privilege that I had that not everybody has. But I think, like Alex said, it's incredibly difficult to make those kinds of decisions. But I do believe fundamentally that every single person who struggles with substance use disorder can get recovery at some point. We just don't know what the timeline is and when that point is. And so if they're trying, their possibility is there. And I know that's hard on the kids. It really is. But yeah, there's always hope.
And Tiffany, I'm wondering, as you're listening to this, any thoughts that you have? And in particular, I know something that you've talked a lot about is the role culture plays in parenting and recovery. And Alex touched on that a little bit. So any thoughts that are on your mind, but then also if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what Meghann and Alex said is so beautifully said. I don't have anything to add there. I mean, it's probably the thing that keeps me up at night in this work, honestly, is the systems work. It just feels like this big mountain and you're just at the base and how am I going to get up there? But like Meghann said, in that similar kind of frame of mind, if a person is alive, they are capable of seeing recovery at some point. And so similarly, I'm applying that parallel process to myself. And like, as long as I'm in this work, like I have another day that I can like impact change as a provider. And it's incredibly difficult, but I feel like hope is possible. Otherwise we wouldn't do this work. Like it, and I supervise coaches who are just now maybe getting their kids back, or might have, another child, an older child in care, and might have had a younger child that they're actively parenting. So there's so many complex issues here. But I hear firsthand from them about the importance of like why like building this workforce up with peer recovery coaches is so important, right? Because they're out there, like they're in the communities, they're in courts, they're in those DCF meetings, they're at care reviews, they are talking the talk and walking the walk. And that is, I feel like, such a huge asset. And I hope to see that develop more over time. So I pour into that, I invest in that. I feel like that's where the change is going to happen. Like the revolution will start there. And hopefully, we'll get to see it soon, but reap the rewards. But and to touch on the part that Alex said, just the piece around culture. I mean, I think for me, I'm a Dominican American, first generation immigrant in this country. So my lens around culture and parenting and recovery has been one that really thinks about access and care, right? And I don't think it's separate from the conversation we were just having. Where are families located and where are services located? We were just having a conversation before folks jumped on around where we live and where we're situated. And some of these places, even in Massachusetts, and I don't want to speak for other states, I know we have folks from everywhere, are so remote and so fragmented from where, the services are. What's the transportation like? There's just so much injustice around access and care that I think is absolutely inexplicably tied to, culture and systems of oppression. And also then like once there is a treatment provider or someone has like, a waiver to, administer medication assisted treatment, like it might not be in a culturally or linguistically competent way. Like they might have to go to a place that like does not reflect their cultural values, or people don't look like them. They don't have materials in their language. So I think that there's sort of that level work around like really reducing barriers to access and care and treatment. But also like what assumptions or beliefs do we hold as providers regarding cultural norms, like in the families we serve? And I speak as a provider that, I have my singular experience, but like that is not, it's not a monolith. So I don't pretend that I know every experience out there. That is the Dominican American experience. I don't understand other countries and other cultures. So, and Alex and I, mentioned that yesterday, like, we speak as our singular, representative, but there's so much complexity and nuance within culture that it's so hard to generalize. But again, I think a lot about like, are we upholding dominant narratives about what is right and wrong, and the morality issue that Meghann brought up in the context of parenting and recovery. How do families talk about substances and substance use disorders in their families? My family, we didn't talk about it. It was this big secret. It was very shameful. The reason why my cousins lived with us and we called them brother and sister was because that, my aunt was out somewhere, working. Like it was always something, it was like not the truth, right? And then there's just speculation, and that adds to that stigma and that shame. And then, I think in that spirit, like how do we engage the entire family, biological or chosen, as Meghann has gracefully shared with us today? Like, folks have systems, they have people, they have tribes, they have communities they come from. How do we engage them as a way to increase recovery capital and social capital? Like there's so much power there, and we're not tapping into it nearly enough, I don't think. So again, I just think it's about unpacking and like redefining some of the like Western ways we've come to learn about like addiction and treatment. I think a lot about this clinical term called like non-compliance. It's like my favorite, like, I like, okay, that keeps me up at night. And now you guys know that the systems work keeps me up at night, those two things. We talk about resistance and non-compliance, like, what can we understand about these terms that have come in a very professionalized way that we adopt as a way to describe our families and our parents, who are struggling with substance use disorder. And what are we not considering? Like, are we reenacting or replicating these, systems of oppression in our engagement with our clients? Like, how is safety, emotional or otherwise, talked about or understood in these different cultures? So I think there are so many layers to the culture. I would love to just do like a whole day about culture and parenting and recovery. But I think it's so nuanced and so complex. But at the very least, I think the reflective piece, like constantly examining, our own understanding of how we've learned about these things and challenging them whenever we have spaces to do that. So.
Thank you for that. It's always striking to me when I hear the folks doing recovery work versus, and I shouldn't put it as versus, but in the clinical world where we hear non-compliance and then we hear recovery and trauma informed and self-determination and authenticity and the words we use, ultimately maybe we're trying to, maybe not often, not always, but we're often trying to get to the same place, right? But the stigma associated with the words that we choose, right, is so powerful. It seems like changing vocabulary is one small and big step towards minimizing stigma or working to eliminate it. We have time for one, maybe two more questions here. I know one question that had come up is how you think about, I know you all in different ways have served as mentors or formal recovery specialists, or in Tiffany's case, you're working with a team of recovery specialists. How do you balance issues of like boundaries and disclosure when you're working with people, and how do you think about supervising or coaching them to be able to work with people? And I can toss that to, I see Alex taking himself off of mute. Yeah. Okay, good. Go for it.
So, when I supervise, obviously, part of coaching of recovery is sharing your story. But it's like I tell people, and I tell my recoverees, I say, listen, I mean, it's good to share stories, but if I don't have to, and I can make it about that person, then I won't, right? So it's more about the person that I'm serving that is important. I want to know about them. And even if they ask me, I try to shift it, but if they want to know a little bit, then I'll share, right? Something that maybe is going to help them, but today I don't share as just to share and just give my story and things like that. You learn that with experience, right? That it's not about me. It's about that person that's in front of me. We in a stage right now that I can share, right? This is the stage where people give me that opportunity, and then I'll share a little bit about me because this is what we're doing. But when it talks about somebody that I'm working with, I want to know about them. And I'll ask them questions. I want to get to know them, give me a little bit about their background, because that's how I'm going to find out, okay, what services, what supports, what resources they need, right? If I see fit something particular about my story that might help them. But this is the key. I always tell people, listen, I know how I feel. And even I've been in a similar situation to you, I will never say to somebody, I know how you feel, because that's not true. First of all, if I'm working with a female, I don't know how it is to be a female. So I'm not going to tell her I know how you feel, because a female feels different than a man. And second of all, even if I've been in jail and I do groups inside the jail, I tell the guys, listen, I've been incarcerated, but how I went through my situation is probably totally different to the situation that you went through. So it's about making it individualized. It's about that person that's in front of me. I need to make sure that that person gets what they need, and that they tell me, not what I think is right for them. I always tell them, listen, I'm looking from the outside, and you're going to share your things with me, and I'm just going to pinpoint things. That motivation interviewing is the key, right? I'll say, well, what about this? And what about that? And if they are ambivalent, then how do we get to that place where you want to be, right? How do I get you from, if it's going into more recovery or going to work or whatever, getting a housing, how do we get you there, right? And it's those things. So it has to be very unique for everybody. And again, the culture piece is important. And that's why I ask these questions, because I need to know about the culture. I need to know about their background. So like that, I can provide the service that fits for that person in particular.
that makes a lot of sense. And I love the piece, just to call out, like, to use your story really intentionally, right? And to really think about that, I would guess, is something, I know it's something I've worked with people on before, and I've heard it from you all and others. We have time for maybe one or two more people to weigh in. Tiffany and Meghann, I don't know if you have any thoughts there, or anything else you'd like to share.
I'll let Meghann, do you want to say anything at this time? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, one of the things I really emphasize is like role clarity. And I think that's so important, not only for the coaches, but for supervisors and organizations. Like sometimes these issues of like disclosures or boundaries or decision making can be mitigated if there's a clear understanding of the role and what the expectations are across all of those domains. And I think sometimes it gets really blurry because the coach themselves doesn't feel like they have an understanding of what's expected of them. So I work really hard to try to address those things early on. And also the parallel process, like my particular style of supervision, like I really emphasize reflection and collaboration and regularity. Sometimes folks come here and they're like, oh my gosh, we talk so much in supervision and it's always Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And like, you know, and they can always expect that that's exactly what it's going to be. But when you work in detox or you work in programs, like things are not regular. You barely get a break. You probably didn't have lunch that day. You definitely didn't have supervision in a consistent manner. So I think it's definitely this cultural shift. But the hope is that that translates into the provider-client relationship, right? Like that we consider what the experience in front of us is activated in us and what it tells us about ourselves, so that we can examine it through this, you know, relationship of the supervisory relationship. And also like honesty and trust, like it's a balance. Like there has to be mutuality, there has to be collaboration, there has to be power sharing. I'm going to say that super loud. Like sharing power is so important, and people like need to understand that that is like a pillar of like building a good workforce. That is a part of self-care. Like we need to make space for people to take care of themselves and like honor that. So we're for employment recovery coaches. Like we're saying, like, let's look at your week. Do you have meetings you need to go to that you want to go to? You don't have to tell me, but like prioritize your meetings, prioritize your appointments. I want you to be healthy. What can I do to support you? You know, I'm all about that, that mutuality. So I'll leave it there, and there's so much more I could say, but I'll let Meghann if she wants to chime in with anything.
I mean, I think you and Tiffany and Alex have covered that sort of topic really, really well. And I would just say, you know, my view of working in a recovery coach world, you know, as a coach operating in faith, not fear, and that is extended to all the coaches around me and supervision, and all of that is, let's like, don't assume that the what ifs are going to happen. Act as if everyone's going to be successful. Do you know what I mean? Instead of like, well, you know, this could happen and this could happen and this could happen. And are you still in recovery? And, you know, trust people, trust outcomes, have faith, you know, which is a lot, you know, about recovery too, right? And I just wanted to address one quick thing. I think two people mentioned about trust between, like in my case, Sophie and I. And it took some time, but I remember one specific moment where it had been like the PTO, like the parent-teacher meetings. And it was the first time I went, and I came home, and, you know, it's like, you know, she had some stuff because she had a tough upbringing, you know. And I came home and she was like, what did they say? What did they say? And I paused before I answered, and she lost it. She just started, she like read something in my face or whatever and completely broke down to the point where she was on the floor crying and going, what did they say? What did they say? And I just said, you're fine. You're fine. You're doing amazing. You're wonderful. You're, you know, and that, I think in that moment she understood, like, I'm not gonna go and like, you're safe here. You don't have to perform or present or, act as if anything. You just can be who you are. And I think that I just remember that moment so clearly, as like a win in our relationship.
Oh, all the feels, as they say. Well, I want to transition us a little bit as we wind down here. My colleague is going to share some slides here so that I can just share a few things. But before I do that, I just want to say, Alex and Meghann, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, and Tiffany, thank you for shedding a light on what this is like from your perspective as well. SAMHSA is really committed to providing training and technical assistance on these kinds of issues and then some, and we are here at ORN to be able to provide these kinds of conversations and these kinds of resources. So Lee, if you could go to the next slide here. We provide experienced consultations in prevention and treatment and recovery-oriented ways of working. Every state and each region actually has someone designated who can help with many of the things that we've talked about today. And so Lee, if you go to the next slide here, this is our contact information. You can submit a request to orn@aaap.org, lots of just random letters, but it does actually go to several human beings, or you can call that 401 number right there on your screen, or you can go to the opioidresponsenetwork.org. This has been recorded, and so that information will go up somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where, but it does go up somewhere, and we will follow up. Lee, if you could go to the next slide here. So on July 22nd at 2:00 Eastern, we're having a conversation about recovery housing support, how recovery housing supports the recovery journey. And there's some information here where we'll talk about what recovery housing is and how it works along the spectrum of things that we can offer. So that's there, and Lee very kindly is putting the link in the chat box. Thank you, Lee. And then if you go to the next slide here, there's our information once again. And I think I'll go ahead and leave that up on the screen there just for a minute while I say thank you again for this really wonderful conversation. Around the certificates piece, I'm going to ask Lee to address that in the chat box and also go to the next slide here. Oh, that's the end. Okay, never mind. I believe that there are certificates for this, although I have to admit I'm not quite sure. That's a gap in my own knowledge, but I think Lee will be able to answer that, and if not, we'll be able to email around to all of you to let you know both where the recording gets posted, because I just am not quite sure exactly of the URL, but I know that it takes about 24 hours to generate it. And just to say thank you so much once again to our wonderful panelists. We can hang out for a few minutes if there's still burning questions that people have. I know a few people had to jump off, and I think we covered all, more or less all of the questions that came through. So we'll hang out for a few minutes here, and I just want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to go through this conversation with us. And I hope that it's one that continues in your community.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to check in. Katie mentioned I'm going to check in with the team about our recordings. They typically go to our YouTube channel after we've been able to do editing and adding captions on. So we will be sure to email out to all people who joined us today and anyone who registered and wasn't able to make it. And we'll be sending out information certificates. I'm not quite sure as well on the answer for that, but I will make sure that the team is able to reach out to everybody. So keep an eye out in your inbox for the email from us, and please come join us for the Recovery Live session. It is always an electric, great conversation just like the one we had today, and I hope that you'll join us there. Thank you so much.
And so one of the questions that I missed is around resources to give and share with parents. Meghann, Tiffany, and Alex, if you've got any, go ahead and share those out loud or type them in the chat box. The one that I've shared is journeyrecoveryproject.com, which is put together by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. Meghann was involved in that. It talks about pregnancy, parenting, and recovery all at once. It features some really good practical tip sheets, but also video recordings of parents who've been in this before.
Learning to cope is a good also resource where there are meetings for parents that have to work with, that their kids are under substance use, so they do very good work around the state. So that's a good they online, so they can also go in there and get some information and go to meetings as well, for parenting.
Yeah, so Learn to Cope here. The address Lee just popped in the chat box because they're amazing that way. Journey Recovery Project, you can see that link in there. First Steps Together is another one that I see Meghann typing in here. So that's another one, and there's the link there. And if you all as participants have resources that you recommend, certainly feel free to put them in here as well. I know that 0 to 3 has something called the Safe Babies Project, where they're bringing child development specialists in to work with court systems to say, here's what's going on from an attachment and parenting point of view. And we know you've got these court concerns. And so how can we work together as a holistic unit to support this family? And that has been a good resource as well, or a good model that I know has had some successes that are documented. And Lee, again, they are wonderful, popping the resource in the chat box as it's coming out of my mouth. I just have a fantabulous team here. So like I said, we will hang out for another minute or two. It's just about 3:15. I'm seeing Meghann is saying Rhode Island Cares had their hand raised. I don't see that anywhere in my.
I saw that too, but I think she took it down. But yeah, she's
Okay.
there, right there.
Permission to
Hi.
speak, so come on in. Yeah.
Hey, so I'm working with a peer that is involved with DCYF in the state of Rhode Island, and it has been requested a part of their plan for reunification that this parent find a trauma related group for parents of kids who have been traumatized. And I have been having such a hard time to find that. I've tried Parent Support Network. I mean, I've asked everyone, and it's a requirement. So I'm at a loss. Didn't know if anyone had a resource they could point me in that direction. It'd be so appreciated. And a second part to that, sorry, there's also this parent is looking for parenting classes, as in teach me how to be a parent and let me be able to facilitate a group to teach others. And again, I'm having trouble finding that as well. So if you have resources, that'd be so awesome.
I'm on mute here. Where in Rhode Island are you?
Providence.
Providence. Okay.
Are you familiar with Allies in Recovery? Or the REST is for parents as well. They may have some resources. Let me see if I can bring up a link real quick.
So I just finished the craft training to be a family counselor, therapist, whatever. And I'm
Awesome.
working with the co-founder that is now working for RICARES for the rest. And it's more trauma based. That's what I'm looking for. I've gone to Allies in Recovery, WeTheVillage.co. I'm just trying to find it trauma based.
Yeah, I just thought they might know of stuff that I don't know of, being in Rhode Island. But there is a group that does it in Bridgewater, Mass. But they only do it, I think, a couple times a year. And I'm sitting here struggling, trying to remember the name of the organization so that I can be helpful. But I'm sorry.
If you all just want my email, that would be awesome. If you could think of anything.
I was just going to say, I put my email in the chat box here. And if you shoot me a message, I will have your information, because there are a few places that come to mind. I live right over the border. I'm on the Massachusetts side, but I'm very close to Providence. And there's a few places that come to mind, but I just want to check them out before I actually make a suggestion about where to go.
Here, I put mine in there too.
Oh, great. And it's trauma. So the parent training, I feel like that is a little easier. The trauma piece, you're looking for something for the parents themselves
To understand the trauma and how to work with the trauma of the children. It's very particular and pinpointed, you know?
Totally. All right. Well, I can look into some of that, and I'm going to open up an email here and start something there. Like I said, there's a few things come to mind, but I want to vet them a little bit before I send you something.
Awesome. I'm writing down everything in that chat right now.
All right. And tell me your first name.
Bethany?
Bethany. Great. That way I know who to send the email to.
Hi, Bethany. We did the training together.
Yes, we did. I've been waiting to do the
you.
next recovery storytelling one. I've been telling my peers about it to like jump on it.
Yeah, September, but it's on a
September.
weekend. So, yeah.
Okay, I'll let her know. That's awesome. What is someone put in Lee, you put in rypin.org. What is that?
Yeah, I was looking online just to see what kind of recovery supports for parents there were. And that was one of the ones looking at the Parent Support Network of Rhode Island came up. And then I believe that was also associated with the second resource that I placed in there. But like Katie said, we will check in with the team. That was just from a Google, but we will check in with the team and make sure that we can get back to you about any further resources that we're able to come up with. We have been saving the chat box, and we'll also save the transcript from today. So rest assured, we will get back to you. We always love following up and giving more information when we're able to, even though sometimes in the minute it's hard to grab all the resources, but we are happy to assist you with that.
That's beyond appreciated. And I thank you in advance for my peer.
No problem.
No
Seems
problem.
like she's been handed an impossible task at this point, and they're going to adopt out if she doesn't complete it. And she's freaking.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I see Mary Lou putting some good resources in here too. Yeah, AdCare does have some good stuff. So let me take a look. I've got a whole email of things and a few other ideas I want to explore, and I will get back to you tomorrow.
Okay.
So be on the lookout.
Oh, I will. All right.
Well,
thank you, everyone.
we are at time. Thank you very much to everyone. And again, Alex, Meghann, and Tiffany, thanks so much again for your time. And thanks to everyone for joining us. And I look forward to continuing to do this good work with you all.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody have a good one.
Bye, everyone.